Hi everyone, Laura here. I'm actually on vacation this week, so we have a special guest host stepping in, Christine Kim. Christine has been covering Ethereum's roadmap for years, and she sat down with core developer Preston van Loon to dig into the upcoming Fusaka upgrade, what's inside it, what it means for users, and how it affects Layer 2s and client teams. It's a great conversation, and I'm excited for you all to hear it. Enjoy! Are you a builder who needs to add on-chain trading to your product? The Uniswap Trading API from Uniswap Labs offers plug-and-play access to some of the deepest liquidity in crypto. It's on-chain execution at an enterprise level. More liquidity, less complexity. Visit hub.uniswap.org to learn more. Mantle is launching the Global Hackathon 2025 to accelerate the future of real-world assets. With a $150,000 prize pool, backing from a $4 billion treasury, and direct access to Bybit's 7 million plus users, this is the ultimate ecosystem for builders.
Historically, we've moved quite slow by design, right? Like there's just a lot of moving parts here. And the fact that we can get 2 in 1 year is really impressive because it means like people are finding a rhythm and like getting through. And what I'm hearing from my peers, other core devs, I'm not hearing excessive burnout. Like this isn't like, oh, we just worked twice as hard because we were already, working 110%.
Hey everyone, welcome to this special episode of Unchained. I'm Christine D. Kim, the host of the Ready for Merge podcast and the writer of the ACD After Hours and BTC Before Light newsletters. I'm very excited to host this episode of Unchained because we're going to be talking about the Fusaka upgrade, which is coming up very, very soon. And I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Preston van Loon, the founder of Prismatic Labs and a full-time client developer for the Ethereum consensus layer client, Prysm. So, hi, Preston.
Hey, happy to be here with you.
Yay. I'm glad that we're doing this episode together because as I was just mentioning before we started this recording, when I was ideating the show or this episode with the Unchained team, we knew we wanted to talk about Fusaka and also give it a little bit more of a focus on how Fusaka is going to impact L2s. And uniquely, the Prysm client is maintained by Offchain Labs, which builds Arbitrum and L2. So I feel like, you have a really, like you're in a position where you're building the L1, but have like very close access to like a major L2 that you're building.
Yeah, I would say that Arbitrum or Offchain Labs is our biggest customer. So we care deeply about what's happening in L2s and how we're improving and impacting them. So there's a lot to talk about here in Fusaka. This is a really exciting upgrade.
Yeah, I want to talk about the specific impact of Fusaka on L2s, but very generally, let's talk about the kind of like biggest EIPs or biggest impacts coming up from the upgrade. So Fusaka, as we were talking before the recording, has about 12 EIPs in it. Can you give an overview of like the main features, the biggest impact of this upgrade on various Ethereum stakeholders? Like give us the bird's eye view of this major upgrade.
Yeah, I think that almost all of these are very exciting. There's some that are like more, maintenance level EIPs, but this is a very exciting EIP set because we have a really interesting headliner called PeerDAS, and the theme here is blobs, right? We're trying to scale the data layer of Ethereum through blobs and do it in a way that keeps it practical to run at home and to keep the decentralization going and keep the home staker alive, and at the same time scaling the data layer, scaling the L1. There's a little bit of both in this upgrade, and if you like, we can dive into each of the EIPs or kind of touch on them a little bit. We start with PeerDAS. This is one-dimensional PeerDAS. So the idea in Deneb 2 forks ago, so we introduced this blob layer, right, where you can post arbitrary data. It's called a blob because it's sort of undefined what it is. It could be anything. It could be a picture of a cat. It could be call data or the batch data from an L2, which is more practically what we see. Some people, playing games on like actual games on the data layer. There's something called Blob House, which is kind of interesting. But really, this Pure DOS is about supporting L2s. So people that want to build on the L1 and need the data availability layer that we provide. And so when we introduced this, we said, well, let's upgrade the blocks so that you can people can buy 6 blobs. They're all the same size, I think 128 kilobytes, and you can buy up to 6 of them per block. And then everybody who runs a node downloads the blobs, downloads everything, retains everything for a period of time. And when you want to start scaling this, you want to start increasing, and when you're asking more from the network, say, if we went to 12, now suddenly everyone has to download double the amount, right? And that just doesn't scale very well. So there are techniques that we have in computer science where you don't need to store everything, right? The novel invention in Pure DOS is to use erasure coding, which is a fancy way to say if you have a subset of the data, let's say 50% of it, you can reconstruct the other 50% of it. This is technology that was really popular, I think, in the 90s with compact disc players, right? If you were like jogging with your disc player and it like skipped, what they would do is, if it didn't read the disc for a moment, it has enough data to continue playing the music. So we can use a similar idea. Instead of having all the data, everyone having all the data all the time, you just have a little bit of it. And for a normal validator, let's say, what I mean by normal is at-home staker with one validator. They don't even need to retain 50%. They're only going to retain some part of that. I think they're going to have 8 data columns. And there are either 64 or 128. I can't remember. But they don't have to retain all of it. They're going to get a random number of those, and they're going to sample. So they're reasonably convinced that, okay, most of the data is there. I'm convinced that it exists. So it makes it easier to scale the blob layer, the data layer, without having to impose these big hardware requirements, right? You're not going to need more. You're not necessarily going to need more disk space. So right away, when Fusaka goes live, probably is already live if you're listening to this now. Node operators, the blob count is still 6, the maximum, or 9, whatever it was in Pectra, didn't change right away. So all of a sudden, node operators are storing less data and achieving the same goal. That's a huge win. But right away, we can take advantage of that, say, well, now let's increase the target blob count and the max blob count and kind of reach parity of where we were. So we'll see, the Fusaka fork happens on December 3rd. And then on December 9th, we have something called a blob parameter only upgrade or hard fork. And this is a sense that there's not a client update that goes out, like every hard fork, every upgrade, everyone has to like get their software updated. If you're on Fusaka now, you already have this built into your client. You don't need to update again. This will be the blob parameter only upgrade, and that'll be on December 9th. And I can't recall what we go to. We go to, it just increases to 10 as the target and 15 as the maximum. And then again, a month later, in January 7th, it'll increase again to a target of 14 and a maximum of 21. So that's a pretty substantial update to the data layer. We have a lot more capacity. That's very interesting for L2s. So what does it exactly mean for an L2 user? Fees will go even lower, I imagine, which is kind of hard to imagine because fees are so low right now. And on mainnet, I saw the gas price being 0.1 Gwei. I've never seen it that low in my life, and that was amazing to see. But anyway, we're scaling, and that's why it's so low. The actually part of Fusaka was that the L1 gas limit went from 45 million to 60 million as a client default, And because people are updating early, that already happened, and fees went way down because there's, now a lot more block space to use on the L1. That's really great. And then we're also scaling the data layer, so L2s benefit from that. It's pretty cool.
That's I think for context for our listeners, Fusaka mainnet upgrade is happening on Wednesday, December 5th, and we're recording this on Monday, December 3rd, 2 days before. So depending on when you're getting this episode, it could be that fees are even lower by the time you're listening to this episode because of the scaling improvements that are coming through PeerDAS. I want to double click on one of the things that you kind of mentioned, Preston, and you said that PeerDAS, which is the headliner, the main feature in Pectra, or sorry, not Pectra, Fusaka, is one-dimensional. Can you talk a little bit about some of the features that still have not yet been implemented for PeerDAS to be for that data availability sampling to be fully functional? Because as I'm aware, some of those benefits around being able to scale blobs, being able to increase throughput without impacting the home staker, that's kind of still the goal even after Fusaka. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of features are not actually enabled through the partial PeerDAS that's kind of implemented through Fusaka and still needs to be done after this upgrade goes live?
Yeah, so what I mean by one-dimensional is that when we have a blob, we split it into columns, as I mentioned before, I think 128. And you only need to, that's the one dimension. They're split into columns, and you retain a subset of that. Multi-dimensional PeerDAS or the proto-dank sharding vision is a lot more elaborate. I feel like I couldn't do it justice to explain it correctly. I'm afraid to misspeak, but my understanding is that you can use data from other blobs to reconstruct from data columns from other blobs to reconstruct the blob in question. So you would be able to retain less data and be able to reconstruct more. So that's kind of interesting. But this kind of is a building step towards that. And, when we're talking about going to 21 blobs per block, I mean, we want hundreds at some point. So this is, there's still a lot of work to do here. This is a big stepping stone towards that. And the technique we use with the blob parameter only forks is that we can, incrementally ramp up to that instead of going on day one from to going to a significant update in blob capacity. We can do it incrementally. Nice for multiple reasons. Node operators have time to react if they're hitting some resource limits, which they shouldn't in these cases because quite conservative. And the fee markets are a little more. They don't have such a shock to it when it's capacity just tripled overnight. It'll be over a couple of in this case it'll be over a month and a half, 6 weeks. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, some incremental upgrades. I mean, to that point, we were talking about how before this recording, how it's going to be the first time developers have shipped 2 major network-wide upgrades in 1 year. Technically, it's 3 because, as you said, there's the BPO1 hard fork, which means you guys are shipping 3 upgrades in 1 year. And by the number of EIPs that have been implemented, this is by far the biggest year yet for Ethereum development. Pectra was the largest upgrade by far with 12 EIPs. I believe this one, Fusaka, is the same or similar, 12 EIPs. How significant of a milestone do you think that is, that Ethereum developers are shipping this many features in this short of a time?
It's huge. I mean, historically, we've moved quite slow. By design, right? There's just a lot of moving parts here. And the fact that we can get 2 in 1 year is really impressive because it means people are finding a rhythm and getting through. And what I'm hearing from my peers, other core devs, I'm not hearing excessive burnout. This isn't we just worked twice as hard because we were already, working 110%. but something in the way it was organized, just we were able to do it. On the Prysm team, we kind of have like an A and B team internally, where like some people are working on like H-star already, some people working on Glaus, and then while we're wrapping up Fusaka, people are jumping ahead. So we're kind of leapfrogging each other. Like half the team is working on one fork and the next one. So things are happening in parallel. And I think that speaks to, Ethereum community and core devs want to move quickly. Like we want to scale, we like to ship things, and seeing, Pectra was the biggest fork like of all time. And then we're like, let's do it again. And we did it again in 1 year. That's really impressive. And, this upgrade has just a lot of really exciting things, like not only the blob parameter stuff, but their EIPs for like UX that I'm really excited about. Maybe we could talk about that. There's an EIP that adds a free compile for the elliptic curve that is commonly used for passkeys. So what if you said like, I wish that everybody had a hardware wallet? Well, now if you have a phone, an iPhone or Android, now you do, because there's a cryptography chip in there where you have your private key like baked into the phone. So your phone is like the hardware wallet. And now that hardware can sign Ethereum transactions natively. That's huge. Like that's going to unlock like sign your transaction with your face ID. That's going to be super cool. Or your thumbprint or whatever people are using for passkeys today. Passwords are kind of going away, and we're kind of moving towards this model where you have this secure enclave and some kind of like biometric, and seeing that for Ethereum is really cool. So that benefits L1 and L2. Everyone who's using the EVM and supports the CIP will see a benefit of, user experience for sure.
Any other particular impacts from the long list of EIPs in Fusaka that you think is important for L2 operators specifically to know?
Yeah, so there are a few things that impact them. One of them being that, as we're increasing the block size, what I mean by size, like the gas limit for blocks, there becomes a risk for, certain attacks, like just filling with junk and stuff like that. So folks have advocated for an EIP that limits the gas for any particular transaction. So the new limit will be 30 million. And I don't think that will necessarily be an issue right away, but for some L2s, I could imagine they use a very expensive like batch processing or transaction settlement through call data that could impact them. I mean, there's ways around it, right? But that's something to call out. Mostly affects how L2s operate, not like end users won't really notice or care how it gets done as long as it's getting done. There are other things for L2s, like the deterministic proposer look ahead. And what this means, this EIP means, is that with the consensus layer, we don't know exactly who's proposing the next epoch until this epoch finishes. We have a good idea, but there's like, a little bit of randomness that can happen. And so we can't make any decisions based on the knowledge until the first slot of an epoch. And so when you have sequencers that want to work closely with L1 block producers, you need to have that deterministic capability of predicting, what's going to happen in the next 12 minutes. And that way you have like a little bit of advanced notice, like maybe there's some like base sequencers or someone who's like working with validators to like get their stuff committed in a particular order. And imagine you wanted to do, you want like two L2s that like batch their things together, and so they can do like cross-chain intents or something like that. People can get creative with the idea, but that like having that gives a little bit more flexibility on what you can build for L2s. So that's interesting. Another impact for L2s is the fees for blobs. Historically, we have made a huge fumble in the fee market for blobs, where like typically, or for the longest time, they were being purchased for like one way, or one gwei, probably like the bare minimum you could do. And this is just like a naive assumption of like, oh, we're going to find equilibrium in the fee market. But one gwei or one way, whatever it may be, a small number, doesn't even reflect the computational cost to process a blob, right? So we're kind of like giving this away for free and not even charging what it costs the node operators to process, the block to process. So now there's a new EIP that ensures that the minimum fees are at least enough to cover the execution cost. And that way the fee markets are more predictable, and they're not like it can still be very, very cheap, right? But it's not going to be like free anymore, which just makes sense, you know? I don't think L2 fees will really notice this much, but the narrative of like L2's eating the L1's lunch kind of goes away a little bit, because, you know, at least they're going to be paying for what they're using, which is just fair.
That's quite a lot of different EIPs that L2s do need to be aware of. And as I understand, because I've been tracking like the developer calls, there have been moments in the lead up to this mainnet upgrade for Fusaka where L2s were kind of caught off guard by these different EIPs and their impact. Specifically on the topic of like how PeerDAS, the main headliner feature, is going to impact them. And I think even before this call or this recording, which again, we're recording like just 2 days before the upgrade, I think I saw someone from Offchain Labs asking in the Discord whether there would be kind of like a limit in the Geth client around how many blobs you can attach for your transaction to be even valid. And like kind of functionality there changing that was unexpected. Do you think L2s are prepared? Like, are you worried at all that there's going to be any L2s that, unexpectedly find that maybe they haven't updated their proofs for like KZG proofs for blob transactions, and they should have, but they didn't, and kind of like this sort of like unexpected ways in which their operations may not work after the upgrade?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good question too. The blob transaction, like the transaction you do to purchase blobs, it does change, right? And so if you haven't supported that, it's not going to work. I think that L2, the way that we go about conducting these upgrades is that we update the test nets pretty well in advance, right? So I think like Sequoia was updated like over a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And I heard that that's, when people found out for the first time, like, oh, my thing is going to break and I need to fix it right now because it's going to break and then in minutes and, a short amount of time. That's kind of the purpose of test nets. Like maybe it certainly could be better communicated, saying like, here are the breaking changes coming up. I think the EF blog post did a pretty good job of outlining these. There are things changing with like opcode gas cost, and so they're like little tweaks that it's kind of hard to communicate every scenario in which this is a breaking change. People do really creative things, and you can't predict all of it. For the major L2s, I'm confident that they are well aware of what's happening, and that when Fusaka activates, it's not going to be like, oh, your favorite L2 just stopped posting to the L1. I don't expect that to happen. Maybe it could, but I believe that the people running these operations are paying some attention, because it's we've been talking about it for a few months, and like it's been in the testnet for a little while, and like if you haven't been running your chain in a testnet for the last 6 weeks, then maybe you don't know, but people should know by now, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Hey founders and developers, if you're looking to bring on-chain trading to your product, wallet, or platform, check out the new Uniswap Trading API from Uniswap Labs. It's your plug-and-play gateway to global on-chain liquidity. No deep crypto experience required, and no need to manage complex integrations or ongoing maintenance. With the Uniswap Trading API, you'll get enterprise-grade on-chain execution, combining both on-chain and off-chain sources for the most competitive prices. Simply put, more liquidity, less complexity. And this isn't just any API. It connects directly to the Uniswap protocol, which has securely processed over $3.3 trillion in total volume with zero hacks. So stop worrying about liquidity infrastructure and focus on building your product. Get access to the same liquidity that powers billions in swaps through one powerful API. Visit hub.uniswap.org to learn more. Mantle has entered a new phase as the distribution layer connecting TradFi and on-chain liquidity. To accelerate this vision, the Mantle Global Hackathon 2025 is inviting developers to build scalable RWA and DeFi products. Why build on Mantle? It's an ecosystem built for builders. You get direct access to Bybit's 7 million plus users for potential listing exposure, support from the $4 billion Mantle treasury, and mentorship from top VCs like Spartan and Animoca brands. With 6 tracks prioritizing RWAs and RealFi, and a $150,000 prize pool plus grants, this is your chance to deploy on a high-performance modular L2. Register now. The link is in the show notes.
Okay, so L2s are prepared for the upgrade. They had over a month to prepare on those test nets, which is good. One other concern is, do you think that L2s are going to be able to use PeerDAS to its full capability because of the lack of features around PeerDAS as it relates to things like backfilling? I recently learned about this actually from a member of your own team, Preston, that backfilling is a really important feature that will allow nodes to retrieve data from blobs if they accidentally go out of sync with the network. And this is a feature that is not ready in all consensus layer clients, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, we think it's a really important feature. So backfill, what it means is, the typical way people bring a new node online is they sync from a checkpoint, usually the last finalized checkpoint, because that's really what you care about. You care about the unfinalized stuff that just recently happened. So when you start from the checkpoint, you don't have anything that happened before it. And syncing from Genesis is no longer viable. There are actually attacks you can do to trick people about what's happening with the state of the world. So syncing from Genesis is not recommended. It also takes forever. I'm actually running an experiment this month to see how long it takes, and I'm in week number 3, so not recommended. But L2s, they need to retain these blobs, this data, usually forever. They kind of they want to have all of the blobs since blobs existed, and they want to have all the data columns in PeerDAS since they existed. They want everything. So when you're thinking about bringing a new node online, what do you do? And there are techniques, make your own backups and whatnot, but how do you get it directly from the network? Well, you start from a checkpoint sync, and then you do an operation called backfill, which is going backwards from that checkpoint and filling in that data that you're missing. In particular, you want blocks and you want blobs and data columns. This feature we've been working on at Prysm for several months now. It's been under heavy review. It's been one of the biggest features we've ever implemented. And just over the holiday weekend, we were still putting in the time to get it working. And I'm happy to say that it works now. And that's going to be the next release, 7.1 for Prysm. I'm sure other clients will have it soon, if not already. It's pretty important. But there's another part to this too. As I mentioned earlier, that you need 50% of data columns to reconstruct a blob. and a default client only retains 8 out of 128. So we have this other feature we're releasing, we're calling a semi-supernode. And what it means is you'll retain exactly 50%. You don't need 100%. You could, but you just kind of like have redundant data in that sense. You could be a supernode, which is just, I'm going to retain everything forever. I want it all. Maybe some of those people exist, but you actually only need 50%. So L2's, the recommended configuration is you can checkpoint stake with backfill, and you should be running this semi-supernode flag if running Prysm so that you retain enough blobs, enough for the data columns that you can query any blob that you want that you've already synced. That's pretty important when they want to recall the data. And if you only had the 8 data columns, you have to then go ask the network. And the network, the default for most clients is I'm only going to retain the data column for the minimum amount of time that I need to, which is 4,096 epochs. So if you want the historical data forever, you need to have something there. That in our case, that also turns off. I believe that would turn off any pruning because it's like at home staker. You really only kind of want to push the limits of what's the minimum amount that I need. So you can actually delete old blobs and old blocks and old things after some point. But for the people that want it, semi-supernode or supernode flags will be available soon, and you can retain all that data forever.
That's really cool to hear that those features are coming. And just to confirm, so these features are hard fork independent. Clients can just implement these features asynchronously from one another.
Yeah, all the building blocks will be there in Fusaka, and we're just stitching them together to say, if I start backfilling, which backfill already exists for blocks and blobs, but not for data columns. So that's the kind of tricky part, is like you need to go find, because like the way it'll work is you need to find a peer that actually has that data column, because the peers you have may not have it. And so you're kind of like sampling everybody to find it. And yeah, that's pretty much ready. We've been testing for weeks and I'm finally happy with it. So we're going to ship it soon.
Do you wish, in hindsight, looking back, that you guys had more time with Fusaka, like had more time to prepare these features, test these features? Like, I think that was a big topic of discussion and debate throughout these last couple of months. What's your take, Preston?
Well, more time comes at a cost. So if I could have time for free, I would take it. Right? Like we were certainly a little stressed at times, and even right now, everything's done, but it's still a little, kind of get a little nervous every time there's a hard fork. You've been testing it forever and you feel really good, but it's just still a little nervous, there. So a little more time would have been nice. Like I guess I expected that this was going to ship in January or like Q1. I thought it was a little silly to do anything in the holiday season. Like in the US, we just had Thanksgiving last week, and now we're going to hard fork, and then the end of year holidays are coming up and people are taking time off to rest. So yeah, I would have liked more time, but what is the cost, right? Like Ethereum needs to scale and needs to scale now. We have a lot of really exciting activity happening. People are like finally looking at Ethereum as like a legitimate place for real finance. So I hope that my peers were not feeling too stressed out. I empathize with you. This is another huge fork in a year in which we already had one. More time would have been nice, but we also need to ship and ship fast.
I was under the same impression as you, Preston. I totally thought this was going to be a Q1 upgrade, and then it just was not. Which, again, like you said, is not a bad thing so long as the upgrade goes smoothly and delivers on the impacts and the features that it's supposed to deliver on. One other kind of meta question around the shorter timelines for upgrades. I did notice there were a couple of clients, at least 4 in the last 7 days, that had to put out releases pretty last minute, close to the fork date. There was some discussion among developers of how safe is it really to ask node operators to be upgrading to a critical fix just a couple days before the actual hard fork date, as in the case of the Nimbus client? Yeah, I mean, for clients that are shorter resourced, they don't have as many perhaps developers as the Prysm team to be working on things in parallel. Do you think the shorter timelines for upgrades means less client diversity, like smaller clients just will not be able to keep up, or will be perhaps, like less tested, more buggy than the more well-resourced clients that are able to keep up with this faster development timeline?
Well, I would say that a release between the announcement of final releases and the mainnet releases, or the mainnet upgrade time, is pretty common. In fact, we would have issued one last week if we had backfill ready. There are some fixes in there, nothing like team urgent. Usually this stuff is found in testing, but we're constantly finding things that like to improve. This log message is confusing, or there's no action to take. Trying to like make it easier to run, like, oh, maybe there was a bug with like something important, because all features are important, or we shouldn't have them. So there's some bug is something important, but it's not like critical to the safety of the chain. So those like really urgent ones, like hotfix, or like if you found like a bug that would really, really mess stuff up, you need to get it out right away. And I think whether or not that's safe or not, it's kind of hard to say. Ideally you would want your client team to issue releases and quickly, and like when they find bugs, fix them. Like bugs happen. Like whether or not your team is large or small, it really does not have much in the way of like bugs, right? Like in fact, you can have too many cooks in the kitchen, which can be a bug risk, like where folks are, no one's really sure what's going on because everyone has their like small piece of a puzzle they've been working on. So when they're like trying to, and then someone leaves on the team, and you're like, oh, I don't know how P2P works, or like I don't know how the database works. Like you kind of have risk there. When you have a smaller team, I feel like those folks sometimes can be more streamlined, and then like I kind of have a better understanding of everything, and looking more closely and a bit more methodical. So it's not like a black and white of like a bigger team can go faster. It's not always the case. In fact, like we've over the years like always kind of fluctuated between like 6 and 10 people, and it's not a big difference between 6 and 10. Like we have more capacity to get things done, but there's so much like collaborate. Like if we had 20 people, I don't think we could get them twice as fast. It does help that we are able to split up a little bit and split the work and kind of get ahead. I think on our team, or in my personal experience, I feel a lot of pressure about being left behind. Like the scenario you described of like, oh, this client, minority or otherwise, is not going to have this feature in time. What if we ship without them? And that's just like a terrible feeling, right? Like you're trying to get your stuff done as fast as you can, and if people are like, oh, let's just leave without them and see what happens. So I feel that like kind of like pressure of like, oh, I need to get it done. And when you have that kind of pressure, sometimes you can have bugs happen. But I don't think that a minority client is inherently more risky than a majority client or a more well-funded client. It just kind of depends, just really depends.
That's a good point, though. Also, that a good point about the minority clients aren't necessarily the ones to move slower than majority clients. But it's also valid the concern around being left behind of some of the decisions around the timeline for mainnet was done, even though certain clients were not ready with their mainnet releases this time around. Looking back, is there anything at all that you think should have been done differently with Fusaka's mainnet preparations?
I don't know. I actually think this one was a pretty good one. I think this one went pretty well. So it seems we could have done differently. Like we have things in our team that we keep making the same mistakes, and a mistake being like, our problem is that we'll like make a big change. Like I'll just implement Fusaka all at once, right? And then you ask someone to review it. You're like, dude, this is like 10,000 lines of code. Like I don't want to review this. So if we had more time, I think people would take a little bit more to split things up and to make like smaller changes, and then like those can go out more quickly, like piecemeal, get it done in piecemeal, and have more time for documentation. Although like really this fork felt like it was really well done. Like we learned a lot from that. Manu from our team, he's was our PureDOS champion, and he written this like right away. He wrote this document, this wiki page. It's called puredas.net, and I reference it all the time because I'm like, how does PureDOS work again? Like I have to keep like recalling that information, and the fact that he took the time like up front to write this all down, it made review, implementation, testing so much easier this time, like because everyone kind of understood what's happening. And while Fusaka had the same amount of EIPs as Electra, I feel that the number of consensus changes were smaller. Like really there's one big one, which is PureDOS, and then like deterministic proposal book ahead, some like small things that that, and where like Electra had like consolidations and all this like other big things that were like some refactoring that was a really painful. Like it just touched way more of the, because there's this layer that PureDOS does. PureDOS is like, let's just work on blobs. Just felt a lot easier this time. I don't know, and maybe that's why we're able to get it done in December and not in January.
That's surprising. I didn't know that it touched like less parts of the consensus layer and was perhaps easier to ship than the Electra upgrade. Because from my perspective, non-technical view, I'm like, oh, it's the same, like number of the IPs are similar. And still, like you said, PureDOS is a major shift. In the last couple minutes of our time together, I want to talk about what people should be looking out for in terms of mainnet activation. So we talked about its impact on L2s. We've talked about other EIPs in Fusaka, as well as the preparation process. And thank you for juggling my hard questions around the timeline for it. But yeah, for our listeners that are going to be trying to, watch it happen live, what would you say is the best way to watch the Fusaka upgrade happen in real time?
Run your own node. And if that's not for you, there are like live streams, I think, like sort of the Ethereum YouTube channel is going to have something. Surely something on Twitter Spaces, X Spaces, whatever you want to call it. Those are going to be places to be. Usually there's a call and someone sings a song sometimes. It's pretty fun. Like, I really do enjoy the actual fork when it happens, although it is a little stressful and we're always a little nervous. It's still a fun time to get people together and like see folks on stream and talk about it, what it was. And then, the fact that we switched to a time-based system with proof of stake, we can schedule these things very reliably instead of waiting for a block difficulty. So it becomes a lot more fun that way. Yeah.
We'll definitely link the live stream into the show notes of this episode. I'll send over a couple of show notes to include for this episode. On the topic of your nervousness around Fusaka, like compared to, in terms of the technical risk, like the riskiness of Fusaka compared to prior upgrades, like how would you rank it? How like, are you more nervous this time? Less? Similar?
For this one, I'm less nervous in the sense that it touched a lot less of the software. Electra had like changes to attestations and the beacon state and like a lot of different things. A lot more operations. This one's a little bit more simpler in this sense. I think that our friends at the ETH Panda Ops, these guys are doing incredible work testing and building confidence. So the more updates I see from them, I feel really good that, our client is working well with other clients and they're testing it and they're giving us feedback constantly. So the systems that we have are constantly improving. So I feel pretty good. And the timeline that we have where we have months of testing, Fusaka's been live somewhere in a test net for months already and nothing bad has happened. So going to mainnet will feel very similar. Usually these events, the upgrade is very boring because nothing happens and that's the way it's supposed to be. So always nervous because there's, could be a bug hiding somewhere, but we actually do, I think, a pretty good job of finding those well in advance and keeping the bugs out. So feeling good.
Good. I'm really hoping for a very uneventful evening on Wednesday myself. It's going to be like 5 p.m. local time for me, which is great because the merge, I think, was at like 4 a.m. Which was awful. Would you... I mean, obviously for me, some of the things I'm looking for is like network finalization after the upgrade. Are there any other kind of important indicators of a successful upgrade that you're going to be watching out for either immediately after the upgrade or like a couple weeks or months after to know that it was a hit?
Yeah. Well, we'll want to see right away that the new blob transactions are coming in. People are buying blobs. They're getting propagated through the network and they get saved to disk. That's going to be really key. That's the main feature. And then, of course, seeing that data finalize is kind of like the ultimate test, right? If we fork to Fusaka and there are no blobs at all, and it finalizes, that's kind of not quite the success metric. You need both. We need to see it finalize with the data that we're looking for. I expect it will be perfectly normal. Maybe there's an L2 that didn't update, so there's a slightly less volume of blobs coming through, but there will still be some, and we'll see it finalize. And it'll be interesting to see in the coming months when we do the blob parameter only updates. Like that's another exciting hard fork that will happen. And seeing the blob fee markets, stabilize around that, it's going to also be interesting to see how people are pricing blobs when those updates come.
Yeah, those are good flags for our listeners that want to keep tracking the upgrade even after it goes live. One last question on the blob parameter only hard forks that are going to be coming up after Fusaka. How on our toes should the Ethereum ecosystem be for those forks? Like if Fusaka goes well, do you think developers are going to have to be able to kind of rest easy over the holidays in between the blob parameter hard forks? Talk me through a little bit of the risk assessment of the BPOs that are coming up.
Yeah, I think if you're a node operator, like a validator, it's going to be a non-event for you. You'll want to maybe check in on your hardware usage the next day, kind of monitoring it. The thing is that when we increase the blob capacity, it's not going to fail spectacularly. You're going to slowly see your disk usage increase. So you'll kind of want to pay attention to that. Although the way I understand the math that we have now is that these updates are still at par with what you were operating today. So you shouldn't need to, go out and buy a hard drive right now. I think you're going to be fine. L2 operators will want to be monitoring those updates just to see the exciting drops in blob fees. They'll plummet right away when the capacity goes up significantly. That'll be interesting. You're not going to need to update your client. So, if things are working smoothly for you and you're not in need of these exciting features I discussed, the backfill, then you may not have to update your node for the rest of the year. And you can just kind of coast through in 2025 into next year.
Until the next Glamsterdam upgrade, which I'm sure we'll talk about when the time comes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Preston, for walking through the entire Fusaka upgrade with me on this episode of Unchained.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. It's been really fun.
Yes, and I hope everyone who is watching this guest episode of Unchained also found this episode very informational and beneficial to getting you guys prepared for what to be looking out for and expecting from the next major Ethereum upgrade, Fusaka, which will soon be a thing of the past. And thank you to the Unchained team for letting me take over for this episode. I wanted to note that if you want more regular deep dives on protocol development for Ethereum, I have a weekly podcast ready for merge. And I also have a bunch of newsletters on my Substack, christinedkim.substack.com. There is also an interview with Preston on the Substack that just goes into his journey as a core developer. So you can find all of that in the show notes of today's episode. We'll also include links to the Fusaka live stream and the Ethereum Foundation blog posts for Fusaka. If you are a node operator on Ethereum and still have not upgraded, there will be links for you in today's episode to get more information and upgrade. So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you to Unchained for letting me host. Bye everyone.
Bye, see you.
Unchained is produced by Laura Shin with help from Matt Pilchard, Juan Aranovich, Margaret Curia, and Pam Majumdar. Thanks for listening.